Good evening, Shirley Turner here. Tonight we're going to discuss the radical feminist linchpin within the LGBTQ ideology. And this will be across the United States and Russia. Let me see if I can advance this. Here we go. So for my introduction, what we want to do is do an analysis of the LGBTQ radical feminist movement within both countries, further advancing intersectional feminism. We also want to discuss the components of leadership, legislation, media value, and the movement, including the trans exclusionary radical feminist. That's called TERF. We'll get into that in a little bit. In conclusion, what I'd like to do is propose that the value of trans inclusive approach will further advance contemporary intersectionality, feminism within both countries. So let's start with legislative tenets. So in the United States, we struggle with the concept of gender egalitarian society. We are a predominantly patriarchal society. We have women in not many positions of authority. We need to have jobs that are aligned and eliminating sex segregation so that we have equal pay and equal opportunities. And this is because we do have a male-dominated court system. A couple examples of that. This year, Roe versus Wade is coming up for a revisit to continue the ruling for abortion rights for all women. And that should go to court sometime in 2020. Most recently, Trump's transgender ruling was squelched in the courts, and this was the ruling that demanded that anyone in a transgender role was identified by their sex at birth. And so now transgender individuals have the ability for equal rights such as healthcare, et cetera, which is a good ruling that just passed in a couple days ago. We need more women in legislative leaderships. We've gone from 3 to 20% in 1995 to 2018. How we compare to Russia? Russia's a dictatorship. And not only that, it's misogynistic and it's supported by the Russian Orthodox Church. President Putin condemns the LGBTQ society, and he demands a hyper-masculine male brotherhood for anyone who is in his legislative circle. He does have a misogynistic policy approach where he's even created or talked and have a bill on a politically elite military society by donating his sperm to hand-selected women in an attempt to get this elite group of individuals born. There's also minimum leadership in the legislative section from 10 to 16%. 1995 to 2019. So in summary here, we see a foundation of both governments in both countries are run not in the thought process of equality for the LGBTQ and feminist movements. Let's take this into what have been catalysts for radical feminist movement. So in the United States, we went through Me Too. In October 2017, Alyssa Milano created the hashtag on social media, and within 24 hours, replies from women who had experienced sexual assault and sexual harassment hit the different various media groups. So what has happened since then? We've seen the Me Too transition into other activist groups. Time Up is a good one. It's designed for assistance in legal defense funding, legislative changes, and activism support. There's a $24 million legal aid fund that has been tapped into over the last couple of years to support women who have moved forward in just declaring Me Too, but to get justice for what has occurred to them. Of course, in the United States, we're blessed with free speech and the right to protest, which creates an environment of supportive gender identity. Yet the advancement of intersectional feminism is hindered by the trans-inclusive radical feminism. The debate, the angst, the hatred between the groups will be discussed in a couple of slides. So it's definitely something we need to pay attention to. Russia did not have a Me Too movement, but did have I Didn't Want to Die. Very similar, with posts into social media, and it took off with hundreds of thousands of individuals coming forth the next day, or the next 2 days, and stating what had happened to them in their work and in work environments. So what we see as a result of that, there were protests needed. And these women, the members of the LGBTQ community, had to begin this process. What was allowed is one person protesting at a time, where other people had to take turns. So you had this intensive line of people that could only stand out there for a certain amount of hours, and then the next one took its place. We also saw in 2018 that a Russian lawmaker was called into the courts because 5 journalists have reported assaults from him. The chairman on the committee stated that their testimony was emotional and there was no factual bearing, and he dismissed the case. He blamed it on the women being attractive and told them you should expect a swat on the butt. Activists has faced death threats and punishments during radical feminist rallies. And even though the LGBTQ community is in support of it, there still have been horrific events. Elena was brutally murdered in St. Petersburg after leading a LGBTQ protest. She was stabbed 70 times. Russia continues to have coming out rallies and encourages the different communities to advocate for intersectional feminism. It is definitely a risk, but it's what the voice of Russia needs to do. How does the media play in? So the media strategy in the United States is an engagement that perpetuates reliable ideas and practices. We're blessed to have the First Amendment and freedom of expression, which can become a strong platform for LGBTQ rights. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are dominant platforms for activists. New organizations have created tags such as TERF, T-E-R-F, which stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminism. Stryker has actually addressed this in his writings for trans or transgender, and an attempt to identify what is a trans-exclusive radical feminist. So what that comes down to is definition, and it's in a derogatory manner, that it is the theory that transgender woman is biologically based as a woman, which opposes trans woman across both sex. In Russia, the media is controlled by the government. The media reflects a patriarchal binary gender, with Putin still being in charge in disallowing any type of print, which he considers as propaganda. Although activists face death threats and punishment and crimes in prison, their community has found ways to have their theories kept underground so that they can proceed with the movement. The term TERF is not openly used in Russia. Rather, coming out rallies are filled with activists looking for ways to understand radical feminist theories. So what is this? What is this all about? So this is where the countries come together. And I'll start with a quote from Goldberg. The most difficult battles in the LGBTQ today is between radical feminists and the transgender movement. Trans radical feminists' immersion across both countries has further conflicted the intersectionality of transgender. Transphobia discourse has been detrimental with theories not aligned. This is very important because what it says is this radical group within the transgender movement has created angst and hatred that is impacting the ability to be co-joined in the intersectionality of transgender. Limmert in 2014 discussed pro-inclusion theories, defining feminist as one who applies an intersectionality approach representing support and shelter of those from whom the patriarchy opposes. So I'll say that again. The intersectionality approach represents support and shelter to people who face oppression. Serrano in 2017 called this ideology trans misogyny, which her argument was aligned with femininity as natural and superseding biology. So in the US, we have Greer and Raymond, whose theories focus on genitalia as the attribute of femininity. And what, of course, this does is create hostility towards trans women. The conference, the West Coast Lesbian Conference, exposed this hatred between the radical feminists and the TERF, resulting in assaults against trans women. In Russia, Chechnya revolt forced hundreds of LGBTQ into assault situations, and many were taken to their family members and asked to be executed. The Republic of Russia asked that they be executed. Hundreds, of course, fled into other communities, thinking this would enable them to move forward in their beliefs, but it did result in further results, in further attacks, not the results that they did want. So where do I summarize this? It is my opinion that transgender women live their lives as women, and therefore they experience female oppression. That's the same regardless of biology. And in order to achieve intersectional and trans-inclusive model, revolutionary radical feminism as trans-inclusive is a no-brainer. And that's from Dworkin in 1974. The ideology of radical feminism is built on inaccurate biological theories and based on genitalia of the individuals. So I guess the question is, what does it mean to be a real woman? And what it should include is that a real woman really is interested in the liberation of all women, regardless of biology. So the value of trans-inclusive approach will further advance contemporary intersectional feminism in both countries. Thank you.